What's next? Is it Supreme Court definitely, or actually going back once again to the Ninth Circuit Court?
Well, President Trump has 4 options. He can try for the Supreme Court to again get a stay of the temporary restraining order, or he can try for the Ninth Circuit Court again and ask for what's called an en banc rehearing. In other words, not just the 3 judges, but about 9 or 10, how many ever they put on for a broader decision. Or he can go back to the district court and basically argue for the stay, the executive order on the merits. Right now we're just arguing about that temporary restraining order and whether it should be an immediate halt to the action as opposed to arguing the case on the merits.
Right. And Mr. Brandon, since you work Mr. Andrews, you work for the Republican Party a lot. We don't see many of the Republican Party officials rallying behind President Trump, at least on this issue. What does that mean for Trump administration's political future?
Well, it means that there's a temporary setback. I believe the Trump administration moved forward with this executive order to help protect our country from terrorist attacks in the future. There obviously have been some significant flaws and honestly some things that run afoul of our values, and so those things need to be corrected. However, I think the core principle, the core thrust of this effort was to protect our country going forward and make sure that we're able to get a full understanding of what's going on in terms of immigration.
But what about the issue of constitutionality? I mean, Ms. Schwartz, because some have suggested if that is the focal point, and if Trump administration could provide evidence about how this ban, so-called, is being linked to its own executive power of securing national security, it could have a preference. I mean, when it comes to the winning ground. Ms. Schwartz.
Well, Ms. Wei, I really think that Donald Trump has a moment here to stand up as the executive, as the President of the United States, and say, listen, we want to make sure we get this right. Perhaps we move too fast, and go back and amend that order, take out the parameters of which were deemed the most horrific, and make it work. And this could be a big leadership moment for him within the constitutionality of such an executive order if he chooses to make it that. But we all know Mr. Trump has a bit of an ego, and I don't think he wants to admit a little defeat there. But I think actually admitting some defeat, going back to that order and avoiding the whole trial process really could be a good actual step for him forward.
Well,
and make the Republicans a lot more comfortable on the Hill.
Well, then I have to go to Mr. Andrews to respond about that. I mean, at this point, Mr. Trump talked about see you in court, quote unquote. That's the one tweet. The other tweet he talked about is the court has not even looked at the statute, as he said, that which he refers to the constitutionality of the whole issue. So with Mr. Trump as he is, do you think things will get much better?
Well, I think Mr. Trump has already indicated what he'd like to do. I think rewriting the executive order, even going back to the additional guidance that the White House counsel's office gave, and actually having President Trump give that additional guidance versus having the White House counsel's office give it, could be a step in the right direction. However, I think Mr. Trump has already indicated what he'd like to do. Probably going back to Judge Robart in Washington State would be the best way forward for him presently, to the point that the other panelists made a little bit earlier. We still haven't heard a full argument on the merits of this executive order. What Judge Robart said is that the order remaining in place is going to do more harm than good until a full argument of the merits of the executive order can be had. And so I believe both sides have until February 17th to file papers to have an actual court argument about on the merits of the bill in Washington State, and that's probably going to be the next step.
Okay, several things, Professor Hagle, I want you to respond to this. First of all, what would this have about the credibility of this administration, this president, on some of the other appointees, for example, about his administration to be confirmed by the Congress, mean in a way? Secondly, what would that mean for the the one that he nominated as the Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Gorsuch's fate on the Capitol Hill? Thirdly, Mr. Gorsuch earlier tried to distance himself verbally from President Trump, and yet White House disputed that he never said that about Mr. Trump. But anyway, what do you think about the current stage result and its impact on the three important issues we have lined out? Professor Hagle.
In terms of the authority of the administration and what's going on, of course, many people are already trying to undermine the Trump administration for a variety of reasons, and it's political theater, and that's nothing new about that particularly, although it seems to be a little bit more intense with the Trump administration. So in that sense, those that are opposing Trump will take some joy, I suppose, is maybe the word to use, in terms of this defeat for the Trump administration. But I think long term it's not a huge defeat, although it does appear bad coming so early in the administration's term. As far as Gorsuch is concerned, it probably won't hurt him much, although again we did hear some people talking about how this may put a little bit more pressure on some Democrats to vote against him, simply because there's a possibility that this case may go before the Supreme Court ultimately, and Gorsuch could be the important deciding fifth vote to make sure that the executive order is upheld. And it is interesting that Gorsuch made a few comments concerning, they said he was concerned about how some of Trump's comments were disparaging of the judiciary, and that's not surprising that judges don't like to have their decisions disparaged. Gorsuch claimed that he wasn't talking specifically about Trump, but it's hard not to include Trump's comments as part of that concern.
Right. Well, at this point, it is not just what's going on in the United States that might have an impact, but also the international community, some would argue. World leaders and cause-oriented groups have scored President Trump's temporary travel ban, especially the fact that the order singled out predominantly what they believe as the Muslim countries. The Chinese Foreign Ministry, in a statement sent to Reuters earlier, said it had noted the reports of the U.S. decision. It says immigration policy was a sovereignty right. Of course, that was up to the decision of the relevant governments of their own, but reasonable concerns must be considered. That is the ideas and insights coming from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Having said that, though, Ms. Schwartz, national security, anti-terrorism, U.S. need a lot of allies in the region. Many of the 7 countries work closely with the U.S. But at the same time, Trump administration does have a sound argument that there are rising terrorism in those countries, so they want to be careful to have this travel ban temporarily. What do you make of this mixed argument?
Well, I really think it's a very valid argument because, yes, we want to keep America safe from those coming into our country, but we already have very extreme vetting processes in place when it comes to immigrants, when it comes to refugees, and especially when it comes to the great men and women that have fought alongside of the United States in many different conflicts in the Middle East, in Iraq, and Afghanistan as well, so that they too are justified to come into our country. So we vet as we will, but we should not close our borders, and especially when you look at these 7 countries singled out, yes, they are majority Muslim, and there have been 0 attacks inside of our homeland from these countries. So I really believe we have to make more friends in this world than enemies, because it is a global interdependent backdrop that we are using as we fight in the Middle East, as we fight within Syria, and we need those countries to launch our aircrafts from, to gather together, so many of them. So I really think we have to tread lightly and keep our allies very close at this time.
All right, Mr. Andrews, do you think there can be some consensus within your country between the 2 parties when it comes to national security, for example, about things related to the specific issue we have just mentioned?
Yeah, so I do believe we absolutely have to treat our friends as friends. There were, in the first couple of days of this executive order being rolled out, friends of ours who helped us out in Iraq, who served as translators, et cetera, who were held up at airports. And so we have to make sure that in protecting our nation, that we're treating our friends as friends. And I think whether you're a Trump administration appointee, or whether you're a member of Congress working on Capitol Hill, that's a Republican, or whether you're a Republican at the state or local level, you have to agree that we need to treat our friends as friends. And I think, again, President Trump can take some steps forward to make some changes. And even if you look at the 29-page decision that the Ninth Circuit Court held, they hinted at some areas where President Trump can make some changes to the bill that I think Republicans writ large would support.
All right. Mr. Hagle, final words. We only have 10 seconds left for you.
Well, I would agree that we have to find ways for the two parties to work together, but I think right now we're in an environment where it's going to be extremely difficult to do so.